They called it Bastion, a name that evoked strength, defiance, and hope. Nestled in the shadow of a crumbling mountain range, surrounded by towering concrete walls and electric fencing, Bastion was the last officially recognized safe zone left on Earth. Or so its leaders claimed. To the outside world, it was a miracle of order in a land devoured by chaos. To those who lived inside it, Bastion was salvation, shelter from the infected, a place where the screams didn't echo at night, and where ration lines were long but at least they existed. But beneath the neat rows of converted cargo homes and watchtower spotlights lay something else. Something darker. And tonight, 16-year-old Jace Rowan was about to discover it. Jace crouched low behind the supply crates at Sector 4's western gate, peering out through a narrow gap in the barrier. Patrols had just changed over. He had 15 minutes. Long enough to do what he came for, or get caught. He had no real plan, only suspicion. His mother had disappeared 2 weeks ago. Assigned to outpost sanitation, they'd said. But Jace knew better. No one came back from sanitation. They didn't even get a memorial in the wall of names. They just vanished. He pressed his ear to the concrete slab. On the other side, the world had gone silent. No birds. No wind. Just the distant hum of the perimeter's generators. Then, movement. Soft footsteps. And a whisper. You shouldn't be here. Jace spun, heart hammering, ready to run, but stopped when he saw her. Nova Cade. She was 17, a smuggler's kid, rumored to have friends even beyond the wall. She wore patched military boots and a coat 2 sizes too big, one hand clutching something small and metallic in her pocket. I could report you, she said. But I won't. If you answer one question. Jace hesitated, then nodded. Okay. What do you think's really out there? It wasn't the question he expected. Besides the dead, he asked. Nova tilted her head. Yeah. Besides them. Jace thought for a second. Truth? I don't know. But whatever it is, I don't think it's worse than what's happening in here. Nova smiled faintly. Then maybe we're on the same side. Suddenly, the outer gate groaned open, just a crack. Both teens ducked. A single figure limped through, dragging one leg and clutching a black satchel. No one on watch saw them. The person looked up, locking eyes with Jace. It was Mira, Jace's mother. M.O.M. Jace surged forward, but Nova yanked him back. Myra's face was pale, streaked with blood and dirt. Her lips moved quickly. Don't speak. Don't shout. Just listen. Jace's breath hitched. You're alive. Barely, she whispered. I escaped from Site 9. It's not a cleaning facility. It's a research lab. They're doing something with the infected. Containing them. Studying them. Using them. Jace's skin went cold. What do you mean, using them? But Mira was already shaking her head. I don't have time. They'll come for me. And if they catch you here, you'll be next. Jace, you have to run. But first, take this. She shoved the satchel into Nova's hands. Inside is proof. Of everything. Nova blinked. Why me? You're the only one who can get it beyond the wall. And if anyone can keep him alive, it's you. Footsteps thundered behind them, guards. Myra's face twisted in fear. Go. Jace turned to run, but Mira grabbed his wrist for one last time. Trust no one inside these walls. Not the leaders. Not the guards. Not even your friends. Promise me, Jace. I promise. And then the floodlights came on, and Mira was gone, dragged back into the shadows by black-armored soldiers with no insignia. No warning. No mercy. Jace and Nova ran, lungs burning, hearts pounding. They didn't speak until they were deep inside the maze of storage containers near the market sector. Jace finally slumped against a wall. She's alive, and they're doing things with the infected. Nova unzipped the satchel and pulled out a hard drive. If this is real, Bastion's not what we think it is. Jace looked up. Then what is it? Nova's eyes narrowed. A cage. Dressed up to look like a miracle. And for the first time, Jace realized, inside these walls, safety was just another illusion. The next morning, Bastion buzzed with routine. Vendors opened their stalls along Market Lane, bartering canned peaches and spare batteries. School bells echoed from Learning Compound C. And over the loudspeakers, Commander Halrich's voice delivered the same message as always: together, we endure. Together, we prevail. But for Jace and Nova, everything had changed. They sat in the shadow of a rusted scaffold behind the old mechanic's bay, one of the few places without cameras. The satchel Mira had given them rested between them like a live grenade. Nova's fingers twitched as she turned the hard drive over and over in her hands. Jace stared ahead blankly. Why would Bastion lie? We're supposed to be the last hope. The last truth. Nova snorted. That's what they want us to think. Control people's fear, and you control everything. She pulled out a cracked tablet from her coat, plugged in the drive, and waited. A flicker. A loading screen. Then, files. Dozens of them. Photos. Logs. Reports. Jace leaned closer. One image showed a human hand locked in a metal restraint. The skin was gray. The veins bulged black. A caption read, Subject A12, Pre-stage infection, behavioral response to stimulus. Another file was a video. Nova tapped it open. A shaking camera feed showed a lab lined with containment pods. A man in a white coat stood before a panel. We believe infection can be halted, perhaps even reversed, in early exposure windows, the man said, speaking quickly. But the test subjects, they change. Their memories persist longer than we thought. They speak names. Recognize faces. We need more samples. Nova clicked it off, disturbed. They're experimenting with the infected like lab rats. And people like your mom? They were the ones sent to collect them. Jace's mouth was dry. They're not just hiding this, they're building something. A weapon? A cure? Or both, Nova said darkly. Either way, no one's supposed to know. A sudden shriek made them jump. Then laughter. Just a group of younger kids chasing each other in the alley nearby. Normal life, still happening. Still ticking on like nothing was wrong. Jace whispered, if the people knew. They'd panic. Riot. Maybe even bring the walls down, Nova replied. Which is exactly why the councils kept this hidden. Jace ran a hand through his hair. What do we do with this? Nova didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed locked on the tablet. We can't just walk up and show it to people. They'll think we faked it. Or worse, report us. You think the guards would come after us? I think they already are. She pulled her coat tighter, gesturing subtly toward a rooftop across the street. A shadow moved there. Tall. Silent. Watching. We've got a tail, she murmured. Came into view right after we powered the drive. Jace's stomach twisted. They know. Not everything. Yet. She grabbed the drive, stuffed it back into the satchel, and stood. We need to get this to someone who can get it out of Bastion. Someone who won't sell us out. Jace stood too, still shaken. Like who? Nova hesitated. There's someone. Name's Silas. Ex-communications officer. Disappeared from the registry 6 months ago. Rumor says he lives in the old train tunnels under Sector 9. People say those tunnels are filled with infected, Jace whispered. People say a lot of things. But Silas is alive. I've seen him once. If anyone can smuggle this outside the wall, it's him. Jace looked back toward the rooftop. The shadow was gone. Then let's go. Now. Nova led them through tight alleys and forgotten stairwells, always moving fast, always with her ears sharp. Every citizen they passed seemed friendly enough, until Jace noticed how many eyes lingered too long. How many guards had begun to cluster at intersections. A net was forming. By the time they reached the edge of Sector 9, the sun was starting to set. The buildings here were older, less cared for. Ivy crept up cracked walls. Signs were faded. Doors boarded. Nova paused outside a locked iron gate near an abandoned security station. She knocked twice, waited, then knocked 3 more times in rhythm. Nothing. Then, a faint click. The gate creaked open a crack. A man's voice came through. Who sent you? Nova didn't flinch. Mira Rowan. She's alive. And she wants the truth out. Silence. Then the gate opened wider. A thin man with gray-streaked hair and a jagged scar along his cheek looked them over. You've got proof? Nova held up the drive. Then come in. Quickly. As the gate shut behind them, Jace couldn't help but glance over his shoulder. Somewhere in the gathering dusk, someone was still watching. Inside Bastion, they had just stepped from the light into something far more dangerous, truth. The tunnel beneath Sector 9 felt like a different world, wet, dim, and full of echoes that didn't match the steps being taken. As Silas led Jace and Nova deeper into the maze, the sound of Bastion above them faded into a distant memory. Rusty pipes ran along the cracked concrete ceiling, dripping occasionally with moisture that smelled faintly metallic. Faded murals from the old world still clung to some of the walls, smiling families, high-speed trains, slogans like, "Together, Tomorrow," now barely legible through the grime. It felt like they were walking through a forgotten dream. Silas finally stopped in a small, reinforced chamber filled with outdated monitors, radio equipment, and wires that spiderwebbed across every surface. A single overhead light buzzed dimly. It was clear he'd been living here a while. There were food cans stacked neatly, a makeshift cot, and a kettle still warm on a camp stove. He motioned for them to sit. "You've brought something dangerous," he said, eyes not leaving the hard drive Nova held. "It belonged to Mira Rowan," she answered. "She escaped from Site 9. That got Silas's attention. He sat down slowly, face unreadable. Mira was one of the first to volunteer for off-grid reclamation. Back then, we believed in the mission. Find survivors. Retrieve data. Map the infected. But when the assignment stopped returning, no one asked why. The council said they died heroes. She said Site 9 is a lab, Jace cut in. They're testing the infected. Using them. Maybe even weaponizing the virus. Silas didn't look surprised. That's worse than what I suspected, but not by much. He reached for the drive and plugged it into an ancient console. Screens blinked, codes ran, and finally, the files Mira had risked her life to retrieve appeared. As Silas browsed them, the lines on his face deepened. So they did it. They went through with Project Echo. Jace and Nova exchanged glances. "What's that?" Silas leaned back. "A plan buried deep in council archives. Years ago, before Bastion was fully walled in, they theorized the infected could be conditioned, taught, even, if caught early enough. But the ethics were too questionable. Or so we thought." Nova narrowed her eyes. "They're turning the infected into tools?" "Some," Silas confirmed. The rest are being used to test vaccines. Gene editing. Neural stimulation. It's not about saving the people anymore. It's about controlling the future. Jace stepped forward. We have to expose this. Everyone in Bastion needs to know. Silas looked him in the eye. And what happens when they do? People trust the council. They rely on order. You show them this, and Bastion won't survive the panic. Maybe it shouldn't, Nova snapped. Not if it's built on lies. Silas stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. If we're going to do this, we need a plan. He turned toward a dusty terminal and began typing. These systems are old, but still hooked into the mainline surveillance feeds. I've been collecting intel for months, troop movements, secret tunnels, energy patterns at Site 9. Jace stepped closer. Then you know how to get back there? Silas nodded. I know how to get close. But getting in means crossing through the old quarantine tunnels under Sector 12. Heavily guarded. No one in, no one out. Nova leaned in. Then we need a distraction. That, Silas said with a thin smile, I can manage. From a metal locker, he pulled out a transmitter about the size of a book. This signal pulse will trip every motion alarm in the Eastern Guard Tower. If placed right, it'll force them to lock down that side of the city. Jace raised an eyebrow. And you trust us to do that? No, Silas replied. I trust that if I don't, no one will. He handed the device to Nova. Plant this near the tower's base, then meet me here tomorrow night. I'll have a route cleared to the tunnels. But once you're in, there's no turning back. Nova took the device. We're ready. As they prepared to leave, Silas added, one more thing. There's someone else you need to meet. Someone who worked in Site 9 before they disappeared off the records. Name's Dr. Liz Marin. Jace looked up. Another scientist? Silas nodded. The last honest one. Nova paused at the door. Where is she? Silas exhaled. Deep inside the quarantine zone. And she won't trust anyone wearing a Bastion badge. Nova cracked a grin. Good thing we don't have any. As the two teens slipped back into the shadows of Sector 9, the satchel felt heavier than before. They didn't just carry data, they carried the hope of uncovering the truth. But in Bastion, truth was a dangerous weapon. And someone else had already noticed its sharp edge. Night fell heavy over Bastion, draping its towers and fences in thick, silent darkness. Most citizens were already tucked away behind reinforced doors, lulled by the illusion of safety and the familiar voice of Commander Halric echoing over the PA, Bastion remains strong. Bastion remains pure. But down in the forgotten layers of the city, purity was just another word for control. Jace and Nova moved like shadows between the alleys of Sector 11, where the fences of the eastern perimeter rose tallest. The transmitter Silas had given them pulsed faint blue in Nova's hand, silent but full of promise. If they planted it just right, it would trigger a full lockdown of the East Guard Tower, drawing the soldiers away from the quarantine tunnels long enough for Silas to open a back route. Jace adjusted his hood, sweat gathering on his forehead despite the cold. You sure about the timing? Nova nodded without looking at him. Silas gave us exactly 12 minutes from the moment we activate the pulse. That's our window. And if the guard rotation changes? We improvise, she muttered. They reached the final corner before the tower. Nova pressed her back against the wall and peeked around. The guard tower loomed like a prison watchtower from some ancient war. High walls, sniper nest, automated sentries scanning the fence. 2 guards in matte black armor patrolled the base, weapons slung across their chests. No cameras down here, she whispered. But motion sensors, definitely. Jace eyed the shadows. I'll draw them left. You plant the transmitter right behind the generator core, like Silas said. Nova looked at him. You sure? I owe my mom that much. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Be fast. Jay sprinted across the corridor suddenly, kicking a loose piece of scrap metal against a storage bin. The sound echoed sharply. One of the guards snapped to attention. You hear that? Jace didn't wait. He threw a second bolt farther down the alley and took off, his footsteps deliberately loud. Both guards moved toward the sound, rifles ready. Nova slipped from cover and dashed behind the perimeter wall. She reached the generator, an ugly cube humming with power, and slid the transmitter into a crevice between cooling fans. It blinked twice. Activated. She turned and ran. By the time she reached their fallback alley, Jace was already waiting, out of breath but grinning. Told you I could run. Good, Nova said, holding up the device's remote trigger. Now let's light the fire. She pressed the button. A loud bzzzt screamed from the tower's upper decks as motion sensors along the eastern wall all triggered at once. Sirens wailed. Floodlights spun wildly. Red strobes bathed the tower in panic. Guards shouted. Doors slammed. A voice crackled on radios, motion trip detected in Quadrant E6. Initiate lockdown. I repeat, lockdown. From a safe distance, Jace and Nova watched soldiers pour toward the tower. Whole patrol units diverted. Snipers abandoned their nests. I hope Silas is seeing this, Jace muttered. He is, said a voice behind them. Both teens spun. Silas stood behind them, somehow already there. Your distraction worked. My access points are clear. We go now. He led them through an old utility hatch half buried in ivy. Down a service ladder. Into a pipeway lit only by his hand-cranked flashlight. They walked in silence until Jace whispered, "What if this goes wrong?" Silas didn't stop. Then we burn. But at least we burn the lie with us. They reached a sealed tunnel lined with warning signs, quarantine zone, authorized personnel only. The air was stale. A lingering smell, sulfur, rot, and chemicals. Silas keyed a panel open. We're close. Dr. Lissa's hideout is inside the old monitoring station just ahead. She won't come out unless she sees me first. Why? Nova asked. She doesn't trust anyone anymore, Silas said. Not since they used her work to justify Project Echo. He stepped forward cautiously. A faint light flickered up ahead. A door opened slowly. A woman appeared. Slender. Pale. Worn down by years of betrayal. Her lab coat was tattered, but her eyes were sharp. She held a metal rod like a weapon. Silas, she said. You finally came back. I brought proof, Liz. From Mira. And these two, they risked everything to get it here. Liz glanced at the teens, skeptical. Kids. Nova lifted the drive. No. Survivors. Liz gestured them inside. The room was a mixture of science and madness, monitoring screens wired to long-dead satellites, files stacked knee-high, biological samples floating in glass. On one wall, a board with names. Crossed-out photos. Notes in red ink. Liz examined the drive's files. She was right. They've started the binding experiments. Memory tethering. Behavioral imprinting. The infected are changing. Jace stepped forward. Can they still be cured? Liz looked at him, long, hard. That's the wrong question. Nova frowned. Then what's the right one? Liz closed the file. Can we survive what comes next? The room fell silent after Dr. Lissa's grim statement. Only the low hum of backup generators and the occasional dripping from corroded pipes broke the stillness. Nova crossed her arms. What do you mean, what comes next? If there's no cure, then why are we doing this? Lys turned from the monitor, her eyes dull with exhaustion but flaring briefly with purpose. Because what they're making, it's not a cure. It's a hybrid. Jace blinked. Hybrid? Silas stepped forward, rubbing his temples like he'd heard it all before but still couldn't believe it. She's talking about convergence. The fusion of human cognition with infected physiology. Project Echo isn't about stopping the virus, it's about harnessing it. Lys nodded. Subject 14A is still responsive. He can follow commands. Identify objects. Even respond to music. But he's infected. Fully. Nova felt a chill crawl up her spine. So he's, what? A thinking zombie? An obedient one, Lys replied flatly. Jace felt his stomach turn. That's what they're building? An army? No, Silas said. They're building a society, one they can completely control. If citizens rebel, if they panic, if Bastion begins to crumble, they'll replace the chaos with something predictable. Even if it isn't alive. Lys pulled out a tablet, swiping to a folder labeled Behavioral Conditioning. Inside were video clips. One showed a test subject chained to a chair. Its skin was ashen, eyes fogged, but it nodded when prompted, reached for objects when ordered, even mimicked a salute. Nova shook her head. This is too far. It's not survival anymore. It's control. They'll roll it out soon, Lys said. The first phase is already active. They call it Echo Cells, groups of modified infected placed near Bastion's walls to respond to council frequencies. They keep the hordes away, for now. Jace looked to Silas. We have to warn people. Get this footage, this evidence, out to every screen in Bastion. Silas nodded. The Market Tower's broadcast hub. It can override every public terminal. But it's sealed. I can open it, Lys said quietly. My clearance codes were deleted, but I still know the hardware inside better than anyone. If you get me there, I can trigger a system-wide upload. Nova paced the room, the weight of what they were attempting pressing hard against her chest. Then we go. We sneak through before morning rotation. Silas raised a hand. There's one problem. We're not the only ones moving. He turned to a monitor showing a grainy aerial view of Sector 6. A convoy, for armored trucks, marked only with red triangles, was heading toward the perimeter wall. That's the reclamation unit. They're not on patrol. They're transporting something. Lys squinted. They're moving Subject 14A. Nova's eyes went wide. They're releasing him? No, Lys murmured. They're showing him off. A demonstration. To the council. Jace realized the implication. They're proving it works. Which means once they're convinced, they'll authorize full deployment, Silas finished. Within the week, every resistance voice will be silenced, by an army that doesn't sleep or think for itself. Nova looked at the footage again. Then we can't just expose the truth. We need to destroy the demonstration. Lys looked uneasy. If we try to intercept that convoy, we'll be labeled terrorists. Hunted. Executed. We already are, Nova said grimly. We just don't have posters yet. Silas began scribbling on a wall map. Here. The convoy will pass through this bottleneck in Sector 3. There's a maintenance tunnel beneath it, built before the tower expansions. I can rig explosives to collapse the route. It'll stop the convoy cold. Jace frowned. What about Subject 14A? Silas hesitated. If he's in one of those trucks, he won't survive the blast. Lys looked away. Nova met Jace's eyes. We can't let them move forward. If we hesitate now, everything ends. Jace nodded slowly. Then we do both. We destroy the convoy and get Lys to the broadcast hub. The people need to see the truth. Hear it from her. They spent the next 2 hours preparing, gathering tools, weapons, maps. Lys encoded the drive with the broadcast file. Silas rigged small but effective charges, carefully wrapped and stashed in a satchel Nova would carry. Before they left, Lys paused Jace. There's something else. She pulled out a photo, faded, bent at the corners. It showed Mira, smiling beside a group of researchers. One of them wore a red council pin. This man, his name's Arden Vale. He's on the council now. He approved Echo's funding. And he used your mother's research to do it. Jace stared at the photo, rage swelling. Then he's going to answer for it. They left just before dawn. In the stillness of the pre-dawn dark, Bastion's walls seemed taller, colder. The streets were empty, but the city breathed like a sleeping beast, waiting for morning to wake it. And the truth was coming like a hammer. The sun hadn't yet cleared the horizon, but Bastion's armored convoy was already rumbling through Sector 3. Four heavy vehicles with black-tinted windows and silent electric engines crawled down the central access lane. No banners. No insignias. Just the red triangle on each door, a quiet warning to anyone who dared look too closely. From a shadowed maintenance hatch beneath the main road, Nova tightened the last wire on the remote detonator. Beside her, Silas monitored a blinking display connected to motion sensors he'd installed the night before. 2 minutes, he whispered. Convoys on schedule. Nova gave a quick nod, eyes scanning the upper grate. Jace knelt across from her, holding one of the small EMP charges they'd salvaged from an old security drone. His grip was tight, his breath shallow. He wasn't afraid of the explosion. He was afraid of what came after. Above, the streets were quiet, eerily so. The few citizens walking the early market paths had been quietly diverted by a water main inspection. Nova had used her network of street contacts to ensure the route stayed clear, but there were no guarantees. Silas checked his tablet. Subject 14A is in the second vehicle. We don't destroy the first truck. We stop the road after the second one passes. The EMP goes off. Then we run. And if the guards inside respond faster than expected? Nova asked. We make sure they don't. Jace swallowed and stared at the road map again. You're sure this won't hurt anyone else? Only the ones hiding behind red triangles, Silas said flatly. A moment later, the vibration of tires overhead sent tiny bits of dust falling into the tunnel. The first vehicle passed with a low hum. Then the second. Silas counted the seconds. Now. Nova slammed the trigger. A concussive boom shook the tunnel as the street above them caved slightly, snapping a section of road and causing the last two vehicles to skid sideways. Steam hissed from fractured vents. An instant later, Nova tossed the EMP capsule upward through the grating. It burst with a sharp pop, disabling the electronics in the two trapped trucks. Sirens hadn't started yet. Silas waved them forward. Move. They emerged from the tunnel and climbed into the street. The front vehicle was already speeding away, unaware of the ambush. But the second truck sat paralyzed, its wheels locked and lights flickering. Guards scrambled out, coughing from smoke and dust. Nova pulled her weapon, an old repurposed shock rifle, and fired at the first soldier who raised his sidearm. The electric bolt dropped him instantly. Jace followed her lead, flanking the far side and covering Silas as he pried open the back doors of the second truck. Inside, it was cold. Metal. Clinical. And at the center, seated and unmoving, was Subject 14A. He looked like a man, mostly. His skin was pale, but not decayed. His hair was shaved. Electrodes dotted his skull. He was strapped to a chair by both arms, head tilted slightly as if he'd been dozing. Silas froze. He's aware. The subject's eyes opened. Jace stepped back, startled. He's awake. The hybrid's gaze swept across them. Unauthorized breach. Identify yourselves. Its voice was perfectly human, but robotic in rhythm. Empty. Trained. Nova raised her rifle. Stand down. The hybrid blinked. Protocol, self-defense. Threat response level 4. It jerked forward in its restraints. Metal groaned. One strap snapped. Silas grabbed the hard drive from his pocket and rushed forward. Override code, Mira Rowan Alpha 1. The hybrid froze. Its head tilted. Recognized. Mira Rowan. Status, deceased. No, Jace said suddenly, stepping forward. She's alive. She escaped. She gave us the truth. The hybrid's eye twitched. A pause. Silas lowered his voice. We don't want to hurt you. We want to stop what's being done to others like you. You were human once. Remember that. Silence. Then the hybrid whispered, Echo, must be stopped. Suddenly, gunfire rang out from the far end of the street. Reinforcements. Nova spun, firing a warning shot. We're out of time. Silas grabbed the drive and handed it to Jace. Get this to Liz. She's en route to the broadcast tower. You two go. I'll stay here and cover. No. Jace started to protest. But Silas was already pulling a charge from his belt. It's me they're after. You have the future. Nova grabbed Jace's wrist. We have to go. Now. As more bullets pinged off nearby walls, the hybrid, Subject 14A, stepped forward, fully free of his restraints now. He turned to Silas. I will help. For Mira. Silas blinked, stunned. Then nodded. Jace and Nova vanished into the alley, the drive clutched to his chest, racing toward the truth. Behind them, war had begun in Bastion, not between the living and the dead, but between those who obeyed and those who remembered who they were. Jace and Nova ran harder than they ever had, cutting through crumbling backstreets and forgotten maintenance corridors as if the city itself was collapsing behind them. The hard drive bumped against Jace's chest with every step, its data a fire too dangerous to stop carrying. Gunfire echoed faintly behind them. Somewhere, Silas and Subject 14A were holding the line, buying them seconds they couldn't afford to waste. Nova yanked Jace into a side tunnel near the base of Market Tower. Here, she gasped. Service access. Lead straight to level 4, the old surveillance grid. Will Liz be there? Jace asked, barely able to breathe. She said she'd get inside. If she did, she's already setting the uplink. Jace followed her up a ladder and through a narrow shaft, heart pounding, legs aching. The tower hummed with power above them. Market Tower had once been a government beacon, its antenna broadcast alerts, training footage, and daily morale messages to every screen in Bastion. If they could override it even for 1 minute, the truth could spread like wildfire. They emerged in a narrow control room filled with dusty screens and ancient consoles. Liz stood in the center, fingers flying across the keyboard as cables sparked behind her. Her face lit up with relief. You made it. Nova handed her the drive. It's all there. Video, logs, subject recordings. Liz inserted it into the system and began the upload. Security's already pinging anomalies. Once I hit send, they'll know we're in here. Then we make it count, Nova said. Jace stared out the tower's reinforced window. Far below, the city was stirring. Emergency sirens blared in distant sectors. Smoke curled from Sector 3. Civilians looked up, confused. The air buzzed with tension. Something big was coming, and they could feel it. A loading bar crept across Lys's screen, 14%, 27%, 41%. Nova checked her rifle's charge. We hold this room until it hits 100. Jace nodded. If we fail, Bastion never learns the truth. But just as Lys reached for the final uplink switch, a voice rang out over the tower's internal speaker system, calm, cold, precise. Dr. Lys Marin. Jace Rowan. Nova Cade. This is Councilman Arden Vale. I suggest you stop. You've already caused irreparable damage. Let's not worsen it. Jace froze. He knows our names? Lys scowled. He knows everything. The voice continued. Mira Rowan is dead. Your rebellion is based on fantasies. But I'm willing to offer clemency if you shut down the upload now and surrender. Nova spat on the floor. That's not happening. The voice remained steady. Then you've chosen extinction. The control room lights flickered as a lockdown initiated. Red bars sealed the exits. Then came the thudding sound of boots, multiple squads entering the tower. Lys slammed the override button. Too late. The screens lit up, one by one across Bastion. The market square. The ration lines. Medical wings. Homes. Bunkers. And on every screen, the video of Subject 14A. The hybrid sat in silence, then spoke. My name was Elian Cross. I was human. I had a daughter. I still remember her face. They turned me into this. Then came the images, the test chambers, the behavioral experiments, Myra's voice describing the horrors of Site 9. Council memos. Lab footage. All of it, uncensored. Nova gasped. It's working. And outside, Bastion paused. People froze in the streets. Market vendors turned toward the screens. Guards lowered their rifles in confusion. Mothers covered their children's ears. And somewhere, deep in the industrial quarters, someone whispered, "They lied to us." But the moment shattered with a boom as the tower's inner blast doors exploded inward. Elite guards in black burst through with rifles raised. Lys stood her ground. Keep the transmission going. I'll hold them. Jace shouted, No, we stay together. But Lys was already moving. She shoved them behind a side panel and activated the emergency chute. There's a drop line through the tower's spine. Go. Finish this. Nova grabbed Jace's hand and jumped just as the guards opened fire. They dropped into the darkness, the chute jerking and rattling as they descended floor after floor, gravity stealing their breath. They landed hard in the tower's maintenance bay, lungs burning. Nova pulled him to his feet. Come on, Sector 8. That's where Mira said the council gathers. If Arden Vale is still trying to bury this, we bury him first. Jace's eyes narrowed. No more running. We take it to him. They vanished into the alleys as Bastion erupted in chaos. Across the city, people were shouting. Some were marching. Others demanding answers. The illusion had cracked, and the truth was pouring in. Inside Market Tower, Lys took one last look at the screen as guards surrounded her. Her final words echoed on every frequency. You have a choice now. Obey the lie, or fight for the truth. The streets of Bastion had never felt this alive. Angry voices surged from every direction. Crowds gathered around the tower screens, still replaying the footage of Mira Rowan's testimony and Subject 14 as haunting words. Council lies, once whispered in fear, were now shouted from rooftops. Resistance symbols were spray-painted across buildings. The illusion had shattered. Now came the reckoning. Jace and Nova slipped through the chaos, heading toward Sector 8, home of the Council Tower, a steel fortress wrapped in surveillance drones and loyalist guards. Jace's hands trembled, not from fear, but from fury. Arden Vale was inside. The man who had used his mother's research, erased her name, and turned human lives into tools. Nova kept her voice low as they approached a barricade. 2 guards. High alert. If we're caught here, they won't ask questions. Jace scanned the alley and spotted a scaffolding climbing the side of the adjacent building. We go up and over. They climbed quickly, slipping past hanging wires and broken floodlights. Below them, more citizens clashed with council-aligned forces. Some guards shouted orders, others refused to fire. The city was splitting down the middle. Reaching the rooftop, Nova pointed. There. Council access balcony. No cameras. It's now or never. They slid down a utility pipe and landed quietly on the upper terrace. The entrance to the council tower loomed ahead, reinforced but not yet sealed. Inside, the halls were polished metal and silence. A far cry from the rage boiling outside. Jace whispered, "Which floor?" Nova checked a stolen clearance map. Top. Conference chamber. They crept up the emergency stairwell, avoiding sensor cameras and silent patrols. When they reached the final door, muffled voices echoed through it, arguing, panicked. We must contain the riots before they reach the medical district. Liz is in custody. The others can still be found. Halt the broadcast, pull the power grid if needed. Jace shoved the door open. Counselors froze. 11 men and women turned in shock, their fancy robes and badges meaningless now. But Jace only saw one face, Arden Vale. Calm. Cold. Unmoved. You, Jace hissed. Guards raised weapons, but Vale raised a hand. Stand down. He stepped forward, slow and composed. You're Myra's son. You used her. You turned everything she believed into this nightmare. Vale nodded slightly. Yes. And it worked. Bastion survived. By lying. By experimenting on people. Turning them into monsters. Turning them into tools, Vale corrected. Efficient, loyal tools. The infected were going to wipe us out. Now they serve us. Isn't that what you want? Control? Security? Nova stepped beside Jace. You call this security? Look outside. The people are done with you. Vale's voice darkened. The people are scared. And fear is easy to correct. Jace raised a shock pistol. It ends today. But Vale smiled. Kill me, and Bastion crumbles. Let me speak, and I'll restore order. You mean re-establish control, Nova spat. Semantics, he said coolly. Suddenly, the chamber's emergency screen flickered to life, unplanned. A face appeared. Mira Rowan. Bloodied, tired, but alive. This is Mira Rowan, her voice rang. If you're seeing this, then the council has failed to silence the truth. Council members gasped. Guards turned to the screen. Mira continued. I escaped Site 9. I saw what Project Echo truly is. And I know what it costs to create obedience. They used my work without my consent. I gave them knowledge, and they used it to erase humanity. Then another face joined hers, Subject 14A. I remember my name, he said. I remember who I was. What they took from me. And I won't let them take anyone else. Nova whispered, Liz must have had a backup broadcast queued. Vale's expression cracked, just for a second. You think this changes anything? Jace lowered his weapon. No. They will. He stepped aside. From behind the door, a crowd poured in. Civilians. Dissident guards. Even former bastion workers. Word had spread fast. The people had arrived, not to riot, but to witness justice. One by one, the counselors were disarmed. Vale stood defiantly as his guards backed away. He didn't speak again. Outside, the resistance took control. Broadcast hubs spread Myra's final message across every screen. Site 9 was stormed within hours. The infected test subjects who had survived were released or given peace. The council was disbanded. Trials began. Truth, for once, had found its voice. 3 days later, Jace stood at the wall of names, watching as a new plaque was placed. Mira Rowan, scientist. Mother. Survivor. Truth teller. Nova stood beside him. We didn't just take down the lie. We gave people a choice. Jace nodded. And they finally chose to stop living in fear. Behind them, Bastion was no longer quiet, but it was honest. And for the first time, it belonged to its people again. The end white heavy check mark.